In this lesson, we are going to be talking about derivatives of inverse trig functions, and they're very much formulas. The biggest thing that you want to do is just kind of recognize which formula you need to use, and then there's also a chain rule on every one of these. So you have to figure out what your u is within your formula, and then there's also going to be, you plug it in, whatever that is, you're going to replace it into here, squared, or whatever the formula is. And then it's also going to be multiplied by the derivative of that as well. So there's a chain rule that's going to be applied. So if we're doing the first one, we're looking at this problem. And just to kind of start, that is my u. So I'm going to do an inverse sine. So we're just plugging it right into the formula. So we're going to have 1 over square root 1 minus our u. So minus, let me put it in parentheses because we're subtracting the whole thing, minus that squared, and then times our derivative, chain rule. So the derivative of this piece, which is going to be 2x. All right, so now the algebra part. So we do some simplifying, and we're going to have 1 over square root of 1 minus, I need to multiply that x squared minus 1. I need to square it. So I got to do it twice. So I got x to the 4th, and then minus an x squared minus an x squared plus 1. So when I combine that, I'm going to get an x to the 4th minus a 2x squared plus 1, and then times 2x. Then I need to distribute my negative in. So that's going to make a 1 over. So if I distribute the negative in, I'm really just changing all their signs. So let me just do that without rewriting everything. So I change all their signs. I have a 1 and a negative 1. They're going to cancel each other. And we're left with, what do we got here? A negative 4x. So a negative, x to the 4th plus a 2x squared. And then that 2x, I'm just going to go ahead and throw on the top just to kind of combine the fraction. All right, almost there. Last little bit that we have is that we have a little bit of simplification that we can do here. We have an x squared that we can factor out. So squeeze that in over here. So we have a 2x, and I can take an x squared out. I'm not going to worry about the negative. So we'll just take the square root out. We don't want to take the negative because then we're square rooting a negative. We don't need to do that. So let's just take an x squared out. That would leave us with a negative x squared plus 2. And then we have a square root of an x squared. So that's something we can simplify. This is not something we can simplify. So now we're going to have a 2x over an x on the outside because we can square root that independently. And then this is going to stay on the inside, the x squared plus 2. And then we have an x that can cancel with the x. So this thing simplifies to 2 over square root of negative x squared plus 2. And that is the derivative of our inverse sine. All right, and then we'll do one more. So this one, we have the derivative of this. So this is a function within the cosine function. And so the very first thing before we even get to the inverse stuff is we have a chain rule that we have to do. Right? So that first chain rule part is we're doing the derivative of cosine, which is negative sine. So that's the derivative of the outside times the inside. Right? And then times the derivative of the inside. So if we're doing the derivative of the inside, that's our u, right? It's just an x. And so we're going to be using that formula there. And so we're going to have a 1, need a bigger parenthesis. We have a 1 over square root of 1 minus, our u is x. So x squared. And then chain rule is being applied as well. So now it's another chain rule. It's a chain rule within the chain rule. And so we're doing the times the derivative of x, which is 1. So that's not going to do anything. But I like to keep it there just to know that I've done all of my pieces. All right, so there is my stuff. Let's see what we got. Let's see. This right here, you have a sine You have an inverse sine of sine. So these actually negate each other, right? If you have an original function and then you do the inverse of that original function, they totally cancel each other out at the end of it. And they're just left with whatever you have here. So you're going to have a negative x, and I'll put that on the top of the fraction. So you got a negative x. Nothing really changes here. So then it's just going to be over the square root of 1 minus x squared. And that's it. Nothing else we can do because this doesn't factor. It would factor, but it doesn't factor into something that's exactly the same. Right? It doesn't factor into like an x plus 1 and then squared. It's going to factor in a 1 minus x and a 1 plus x, which isn't going to square root. So that's it. So that's us doing the derivative of those two different functions involving formulas for the inverse trig functions.